Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into the story of Sasuke Uchiha Naruto, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up. Let's begin. Approximately 3,500 characters. Before the silence, there was laughter. Not loud or wild, just the kind that echoed softly through the long wooden hallways of the Uchiha compound. The kind that came from a younger brother chasing the shadow of someone he loved more than anyone else in the world. Sasuke Uchiha was once a boy with stars in his eyes. A quiet child, yes, but not a sad one. He walked carefully, spoke gently, and always looked up, always toward one person. Itachi, his big brother, his world. The one who walked ahead of him with the ease of someone already destined for greatness. The compound was peaceful in those days. Warm lights and paper lanterns. Chatter over evening meals. The steady rhythm of sandals on wooden floors. Sasuke would peek through the doorways, wide-eyed and hopeful, watching his father speak to elders, his mother stirring a pot, and Itachi tying his forehead protector before heading out again. He was always heading out. Sasuke didn't understand the missions or the village politics. He didn't understand how someone could already carry so much weight at such a young age. But he did understand love and admiration. He understood what it meant to walk 10 steps behind someone and still feel like they were pulling you forward. Sometimes Itachi would rest beneath the trees lining the courtyard, arms behind his head, eyes closed. Sasuke would tiptoe closer and sit beside him, never speaking, just waiting. And Itachi, without opening his eyes, would say, "You're here again." Sasuke would nod, and the two brothers would sit, saying almost nothing but sharing everything. Itachi's presence was a kind of peace. A warmth Sasuke didn't know he was memorizing. Not until it was gone. In the academy, Sasuke was quiet, focused, always watching. He wasn't the best, not yet, but he worked like he had something to prove. Because he did. He wanted to stand beside his brother, not behind. Every kunai throw was practiced longer than needed. Every technique repeated late into the evening when others had gone home. He wanted his father to see it. He wanted his brother to notice. And sometimes they did. His father would offer a nod. Itachi would place a hand gently on his head, ruffling his hair without saying a word. To Sasuke, that silence meant everything. But silence would soon change. It would go from comforting to cold, from peaceful to hollow. The laughter would fade. The lights would dim, and one night, the hallway would be too quiet, far too quiet. A stillness would creep in, one even Sasuke, as young as he was, would feel in his bones. He didn't know it yet, but the world he loved was already cracking. And no one had warned him that love could vanish like that, like smoke and wind, like breath and winter dot. Even as a child, Sasuke noticed things. The way his mother smiled a little less. The way his father stayed out longer, returning with quiet footsteps and tired eyes. The way neighbors spoke in hushed tones, glancing at each other when they thought no one was watching. And above all, he noticed Itachi. His brother, once so present, had begun to vanish in small ways. He still came home, still ruffled Sasuke's hair, still spoke in that calm, measured voice. But something had shifted. The warmth in his eyes flickered now. Not gone, but distant, as if Itachi was carrying something heavy, something he could no longer share. Sasuke would still run to the gate when Itachi returned from missions. He would smile wide, eyes bright, waiting for a glance, a pat on the head, a soft word. Sometimes he got it. Sometimes he didn't. And each time he didn't, a quiet ache would grow in his chest. He would try harder the next day, train longer, study more. He thought maybe, just maybe if he worked hard enough, he could reach him again. But no one told Sasuke that some distances aren't about effort. Some silences aren't meant to be broken, and some hearts are already fading into shadow. Still he tried. He practiced shuriken throws until his hands were raw. He repeated fire-style jutsus until he lost his voice. He watched from the sidelines as his father praised Itachi to the elders, always with that same phrase, "He is the pride of our clan." And Sasuke, standing just a few feet away, would smile anyway, because he was proud too, even if no one noticed him yet, even if his father's gaze passed right through him. He believed one day he would shine too. One night, Sasuke came home later than usual. Training had run long. His hands ached. His shoulders were sore. The compound was quiet. Too quiet. No soft laughter from the courtyard. No scent of rice or miso from the kitchen. No light in the windows. Only moonlight, pale and silent, stretching across the stone path. He walked slowly, sandals brushing against fallen leaves, heart beginning to drum for no reason he could explain. He pushed open the door. Empty. His mother wasn't by the stove. His father wasn't in his chair. No voices. Just stillness. He stepped into the hallway. Lanterns unlit. Curtains unmoving. The silence no longer felt peaceful. It felt unnatural. He called out once. No reply. He moved room to room, small footsteps echoing against the floor. And then a sound. A breath? A shift? A presence? He turned the corner and stopped. Itachi stood at the far end of the hallway, bathed in shadow, eyes unreadable. Sasuke opened his mouth to speak, but the words never came. Because in that moment, something in his brother's face said, "Don't ask, don't move, just remember me like this." And then the light changed, and everything else broke. The night was made of stillness. Even the wind had stopped moving. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Sasuke walked forward slowly, unsure of what pulled him, or what kept trying to hold him back. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. The air was colder than it had ever been. And at the end of it all, Itachi, standing alone, silent, shadowed. His eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, not with anger, not with warmth, with something in between, something Sasuke couldn't name. He called out again, softly, like a question. But Itachi didn't speak. He only turned and vanished into the dark, and Sasuke ran, through empty corridors, past rooms that had once been filled with voices, past overturned chairs, fallen picture frames, open doors that would never close again. He ran with his heart thudding, his breath catching, calling out names, his mother's, his father's, his brothers. But only echoes answered. The compound, once so full, was now a shell, a hollow that rang with the ghosts of footsteps. Then he saw them, his parents, lying side by side as if asleep. Their faces were peaceful. Their hands were still. And there was no sound except the soft flicker of a candle nearby, almost burned down to nothing. Sasuke couldn't breathe. He dropped to his knees. He reached out. But the warmth was already gone. A weight fell on his shoulders, invisible, heavy, permanent. And when he looked up, Itachi was standing above him, watching, waiting. Sasuke's voice cracked. "Why?" Itachi didn't answer, only stared with those endless red eyes. Eyes that seemed to see through time, through pain, through everything. And then he spoke. Words that would haunt Sasuke's dreams. "If you want to kill me, hate me, survive, run, run, and cling to life." A whisper wrapped in thunder. Sasuke turned. He ran. Through corridors soaked in silence. Through memories now tinged with blood and confusion. His feet hit the stones harder than ever before. His breath came in sobs, but he didn't stop. He didn't look back, because there was nothing left behind him. Only shadows. Only ghosts. Only a broken name that still echoed between the walls. Uchiha. Outside, the moon was bright, cruelly calm. The world beyond the gate looked unchanged, peaceful even. But everything inside Sasuke was shattered. And in that quiet ruin of a night, a new silence began to grow inside him. A silence shaped like loss, shaped like betrayal, shaped like Itachi. He didn't cry. Not then. He just stared at the stars as the sky began to pale. And for the first time in his young life, he wished he had never admired anyone. He wished he had never loved that deeply, because now all that love had nowhere to go, except inward, where it would become something else entirely. Not sorrow, not grief, but something colder, something sharper. A promise made without words. In the weeks that followed, the compound remained closed. Shuttered windows. Dust gathering on steps that once echoed with laughter. The lanterns were never lit again. People whispered, of course. Some pitied him. Some feared him. Some said nothing at all. Sasuke didn't speak either. He walked through the village like a ghost with a child's face. His eyes didn't search for anything anymore. His steps had no destination. And every time he passed by families, mothers calling children to dinner, fathers lifting sons onto their shoulders, something inside him sank deeper. He didn't hate them. He just didn't belong among them. Not anymore. The academy became a place of quiet routine. He sat by the window, always in the same seat. Never laughed. Never raised his hand. Never looked anyone in the eye for too long. And yet his name spread. He's the last Uchiha. He's a genius. He's cold but cool. They didn't know. They couldn't know. That every move he made, every perfect kunai throw, every fire jutsu landed with precision wasn't for praise. It was for something far darker. A vow whispered beneath the breath of a boy who once loved his brother more than anyone. Now that love had hardened into something else. Not yet hatred, but something that knew it would become that. In time. Sometimes at night, Sasuke would stand at the edge of the village where the land dipped into quiet hills. He would look at the moon, the same moon that had lit the hallways of his past, and wonder, where was Itachi now? Was he sleeping? Training? Watching? Did he remember? Sasuke didn't know. But he remembered everything. The weight of his father's silence. The softness of his mother's touch. The way the compound smelled of fresh rain in summer. The way Itachi's eyes once smiled without moving his lips. And then how they didn't. Dreams came in fragments. Some gentle voices from the kitchen, a warm bowl of miso, his mother's fingers running through his hair. Some sharp flashes of red eyes, the cold of the stone floor, a single candle flickering before it went out forever. He would wake up before dawn. Always before dawn. Sit still for hours before the village stirred. Eyes open, heart silent. He wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He was something else now. A vessel of purpose. A name carrying only one command. Become stronger. Stronger than the rest. Stronger than the pain. Strong enough to make him pay. The world didn't need to understand. They didn't need to see, only he would walk this road. Alone. And he would not stop until the silence in his chest was replaced, not with peace, but with justice. Or something that looked like it. Years would pass. People would come into his life, some with kindness, some with questions. But Sasuke had already chosen. He would be polite. He would play the part. He would pass the tests. But inside, the hallway remained. The long, dark hallway with flickering lanterns, and a brother waiting in shadow. Until he reached that shadow. Until he stepped into that silence with answers and fury, and all the strength he could gather. He would not rest. He would not soften. He would not break. He would remember. Every night, every name, every light that went out. And above all, he would remember Itachi, not as the brother he loved, but as the ghost who stood at the end of everything. After the silence of the compound came the silence of everything else. Sasuke Uchiha lived in a corner of the village now. Not far, not hidden, just removed. A quiet apartment, small and clean, where the clock ticked louder than it should, and the nights stretched longer than anyone else could bear. The village went on around him, people chatting in the streets, children laughing after class. Vendors calling out prices in the market. But none of that sound ever truly reached him. It stopped at the edge of his world, where a door closed gently, where slippers rested at the entrance, and where a young boy sat at the dinner table, staring at an empty chair. He always made enough rice for two, but only ate from one bowl. The academy became his routine. He walked the same path every day. His satchel slung neatly over one shoulder. Eyes straight ahead. He didn't speak unless asked. Didn't smile unless expected. Didn't look back once he entered the school gates. In class, he was calm. Sharp. Precise. Teachers noticed. Students stared. They whispered, "That's Sasuke Uchiha. He's so cool. He never talks to anyone." But none of them knew what he carried. None of them had seen the ghosts he saw in every hallway. None of them sat in that cold kitchen, eating quietly while a candle flickered nearby the same way it had flickered on the night his world ended. At lunch, he often ate alone. Not because no one wanted to join him. Because no one could. There was a space around Sasuke, invisible but solid like mist, wrapped around stone. Unreachable. Unshakable. Even those who tried shyly offering him snacks or smiling as they walked by never stayed long. He would nod politely and never unkind. But the wall was always there. Not rude, not angry, just silent. And then there were the nights. The quietest part of the story. After the sun dipped below the Hokage monument, after the chatter of the market faded, after the world slowed down, that's when he would walk. Sandals soft against the village path, hands tucked into his pockets, eyes always drifting upward toward the moon. It was always the same moon, the one that had watched over the compound. The one that had seen everything he couldn't forget. And though it gave no answers, no warmth, it stayed. That stillness, that quiet companionship was all he had left. Sometimes he would stop by the riverbank, watch the water slip past the rocks, not thinking, not remembering, just being still. That too became a kind of survival, not fighting the pain, not feeding it either, just letting it sit beside him like a shadow that no longer startled him. He had learned early, pain that is loud fades, but pain that is silent stays. And Sasuke's pain had never spoken a word, Dot. The instructors at the academy quickly realized that Sasuke wasn't like the other students. He didn't raise his hand for praise. He didn't beam with pride when his shuriken hit the bullseye. He didn't giggle with friends when class ended. But he learned faster than anyone else. His chakra control was sharp. His taijutsu clean. His fire-style jutsus, rare for someone his age, were powerful, almost instinctual. They praised him quietly in the teacher's lounge. He's gifted, top of the class, just like his brother. But Sasuke didn't care for the admiration. He didn't hear it, because he wasn't working to impress anyone. He was working for something else entirely. Each day ended the same, training long after others went home, practicing alone in the schoolyard until the sky turned purple, repeating the same hand seals until his fingers trembled. There were no shortcuts in his world. Only repetition, only silence, only the soft echo of his own breath as he pushed harder and harder. Some nights, he would stand in front of the mirror in his room, staring at his reflection as sweat rolled down his neck. He would narrow his eyes. Imagine Sharingan. Imagine standing across from him, the brother who had left him in that corridor, who had taken everything. And then he would close his eyes, not in pain, in promise, a quiet one. He never cried. Not once. Not when he scraped his knees. Not when teachers scolded him for isolating himself. Not even when the other children laughed behind his back. Because he had learned something no one else his age understood. Tears didn't bring anyone back. They didn't rebuild compounds. They didn't light cold kitchens. They didn't erase red eyes into the dark. So he stored everything inside, like placing sharp glass in a velvet box. Hidden, quiet, dangerous. From time to time, he noticed the others. The boy with loud orange clothes who made a scene every hour. The girl with pink hair who blushed when their eyes met. The boy with sunglasses who never showed emotion. The one with a dog always by his side. They were all trying in their own ways to be seen. But Sasuke no longer needed that. Being seen didn't matter. Seeing his goal, that's all that remained. And so when they played, he trained. When they napped, he meditated. When they laughed, he listened to the wind instead. That wind sometimes reminded him of his brother's voice, quiet and smooth, like leaves drifting over water. And in those moments, something in his chest would tighten. But it passed. It always did. He still walked at night. Still stared at the moon. Still ate quietly in that tiny apartment, his chopsticks clinking gently against a single plate. Somewhere in him, the boy who had chased after Itachi's shadow still lived. But now he walked alone, not because he wanted to, but because the path he had chosen no longer allowed companions. And in his reflection, he could already see it. Not a child, not a student, but something else forming slowly, cold, sharp, focused. A future written in silence. When names were called for the new Genin teams, Sasuke barely listened. He already knew he'd be placed with someone. That was the system. Form a squad, train together, work as a unit. But deep down, he had already accepted a truth. No team would change his path. He didn't expect them to understand him. Didn't expect them to follow him. Didn't expect to care. So when the teacher said, Team 7, Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha. He blinked once, gave no reaction, and looked away. But that moment would change more than he could have imagined. The first few days were exactly as he expected. Naruto was loud, clumsy, constantly trying to prove something. Sakura was bright, eager, always trying to be noticed, especially by him. And then there was Kakashi-sensei. Always late, always unreadable. Reading that same little book with an expression that never gave anything away. At first, Sasuke kept his distance. He completed every task, followed instructions, answered when spoken to. But his heart stayed locked. He didn't laugh when Naruto made a fool of himself. Didn't smile when Sakura offered him compliments. Didn't flinch when Kakashi stared at him longer than needed. His mind was elsewhere in the past, in the silence of the compound, in the sound of a voice that once said, "If you wanted to kill me, hate me." But slowly, something began to shift. Not dramatically, not even intentionally, just gently. On a warm afternoon during training, Naruto tripped and splashed headfirst into the creek. Sasuke stood watching from the bank. He didn't laugh. But something in him stirred, a kind of pause, a beat of stillness that softened the edges of his silence. Later, during a tree-climbing exercise, Sakura fell hard on her side. Naruto ran to her instantly. Sasuke didn't, but his foot hesitated before turning away, and Kakashi noticed. At night, Sasuke still returned home alone, still ate in silence, still walked beneath the moon. But now, sometimes, a memory would sneak in, not of the compound, but of Naruto shouting in frustration, or Sakura tying her headband tighter. He didn't want those images. Didn't ask for them, but they came anyway, uninvited, unavoidable. Team 7's first mission outside the village was simple escort duty. Walk beside a cart, protect the client, and return safely. To others, it was mundane. To Sasuke, it was an unfamiliar feeling. He was walking beside people, sharing meals, sleeping near others beneath the stars. He didn't speak much, didn't let his guard down. But as he sat by the fire one evening, watching Naruto snore and Sakura wrap her blanket tighter around her shoulders, he realized he wasn't as alone as he used to be. And for a brief moment, it didn't feel like weakness. It felt like breathing. Just breathing. Still, he never let go. The purpose, the cold flame, it stayed. Always. But now, around that flame, were echoes of voices he hadn't expected to hear. And though his eyes still refused to cry, they no longer stared into nothing. Now they noticed movement, connection, light faint and flickering, but real. He would never say it aloud, but something was beginning. Something not loud or sudden, just steady, a small crack in the silence. And in that crack, something human docked. As Team 7 continued its missions, something began to settle around Sasuke, not warmth exactly, but a strange kind of quiet comfort. They trained. They failed. They succeeded. Over and over again. Naruto remained wild, unpredictable, always chasing attention, pushing limits, demanding to be noticed. Sakura stayed observant, growing stronger, always watching Sasuke with soft eyes and nervous energy. And Kakashi remained Kakashi, present in ways that mattered, even when it didn't seem like it. Sasuke never asked for help. But sometimes, they gave it anyway. Like when he stumbled during a spar, and Naruto offered a hand without thinking. Or when Sakura, noticing his limp after a mission, quietly placed a small healing salve on his desk. No words, no explanation. He never acknowledged these moments. But he remembered them, like faint stars behind clouds, barely visible, but always there if you looked hard enough. Still, the ache never left. The nights were still long, the dreams still dark. The silence in his apartment still pressed against the wall, but now it was no longer endless. He had places to go, people to meet, fights to win. His world had edges again, shapes, shadows. And every now and then, between the stillness of his steps and the cold purpose in his chest, a quiet pause would bloom. Not joy, not peace, but something close. He never let himself hope. Hope was dangerous. It softened edges. It made you forget. And he needed to remember every technique, every scar. Every night beneath the pale moon, eyes open, fists clenched, breath held in quiet fury. He was still moving forward, toward Itachi, toward answers, toward something only he could see. But the road no longer felt like stone. Sometimes it felt like earth, like something that grew, changed, gave back, even if just a little. One evening, after a long mission, Team 7 returned late. The sun was already low, sky stained with rose and ash. They were tired, dusty, quiet. And as they neared the village gates, Sasuke glanced sideways. Naruto was walking just behind him, face streaked with dirt, but eyes full of stubborn fire. Sakura walked beside him, limping slightly but smiling at the clouds. And for a moment, Sasuke slowed his steps, just enough for them to walk together. Not behind, not ahead, together. He didn't say anything, didn't smile, didn't nod. But something in the way his hands relaxed at his sides said enough. That night he stood by his window as all was staring at the village rooftops glowing under the moon. But this time, the silence didn't feel as sharp. It still lived inside him. But now it made room. Room for voices. For laughter echoing faintly in memory. For quiet footsteps behind him that didn't feel like threats. He was still Sasuke Uchiha. Still the last of his clan. Still walking alone toward a past that refused to die. But now he had seen something different. Not better. Not worse. Just human. And though his eyes still refused to cry, they no longer refused to see. In the early days of Team 7, nothing felt balanced. Sakura was precise, polite, and eager to prove herself. Naruto was loud, unpredictable, and constantly falling over his own feet. And Sasuke was still a shadow wrapped in discipline. They met under the wide sky outside the academy, 3 unfamiliar names called together by chance or perhaps by fate. Standing side by side that first morning, there was a strange silence between them. Sakura folded her hands behind her back, trying not to look too nervous. Naruto shifted from foot to foot, a grin tugging at his lips. And Sasuke? He kept his eyes ahead, not out of rudeness, out of habit, out of caution, out of something deeper. Then came Kakashi, late, unreadable, and calm like someone who already knew everything they were about to learn. He asked them to introduce themselves. Sakura was proper and bright. Naruto rambled, shouted and beamed, and Sasuke gave only a few quiet words. There are things I hate. I don't particularly like anything. I wanted to kill a certain someone. No one knew what to say after that, except Naruto, who blinked, scratched his head, and laughed awkwardly. Sasuke didn't laugh. He never did. Their first real test came quickly. A bell, a deadline, and the rule: work together, or fail. It sounded simple, huh? But nothing about Sasuke's mind was simple. He was used to working alone, to calculating, to executing without hesitation. So when the bell test began, he vanished into the trees without waiting for anyone. He didn't need help. He didn't want it. But as the hours dragged and the bells still hung from Kakashi's hip, something began to shift. Naruto charged in, clumsy but brave. Sakura tried her best, but froze at the wrong moment. And Sasuke, despite his skill, couldn't claim victory either, because the test wasn't about strength. It was about trust. When Kakashi finally explained it, the real meaning behind the bell test, Sasuke felt something unfamiliar stir inside him. Not guilt, not shame, but a question. Had he ever truly trusted anyone? And if not, why? He knew the answer, of course. Because the last person he trusted had left him standing in silence. Because love had turned to ashes in one single night. But still the question lingered. And in that moment, under the soft shade of the trees, something settled in his chest. He didn't have to open up. But he didn't have to push everyone away either. Their days slowly found rhythm. Missions. Training. Sparring beneath clouds that drifted lazily overhead. Sakura's voice became familiar, soft, sometimes nervous, always kind. Naruto's energy was loud, chaotic, but there was something bright beneath it. Something that never dimmed, no matter how many times he failed. And Kakashi? He became a quiet presence behind them. Not intrusive, just there, watching, guiding, occasionally smiling behind that ever-present mask. Sasuke still didn't speak much, still kept to himself, still walked ahead or behind, never beside. But one afternoon, after a tiring mission, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the air turned gold, Naruto laughed. A full, unguarded, ridiculous laugh. Sakura chuckled softly beside him, and Sasuke just for a moment looked over his shoulder and smiled. Not a big smile, not one anyone noticed, but it was there, brief, small, real. And so slowly, without permission, light began to return. Not the blinding kind, but soft, like a lantern in a hallway that had been dark for far too long. A voice echoed gently inside him, now not of hatred, but of something else. You're not alone anymore, even if he didn't believe it yet, even if his eyes still refused to cry. Naruto had a way of appearing everywhere, loud, unexpected, and never where you wanted him to be. He would talk too much, interrupt at the worst times, ask questions no one had answers for. But what made Naruto truly impossible to ignore was that he never gave up. No matter how many times he stumbled in training, no matter how often he was scolded, no matter how harshly the world looked at him, he came back again and again, with the same wide eyes, the same burning fire. And slowly even Sasuke began to notice Naruto wasn't just noise. He was persistence. He was light. Their rivalry grew in strange ways. Unspoken. Constant. Quietly important. Whenever Sasuke pushed ahead in training, Naruto pushed harder. When Naruto finally landed a jutsu correctly, Sasuke would refine his own until it was sharper, faster, cleaner. They never admitted it out loud. But they were watching each other always. Not just to compete, but to understand. Because beneath Naruto's shouting and Sasuke's silence, something familiar pulsed. They were both alone, both carrying something heavy, both pretending not to care. Sakura, for all her efforts, couldn't see it. She adored Sasuke openly, defended Naruto reluctantly, and tried her best to bridge a gap that neither boy knew how to cross. But it wasn't something that could be filled with kindness alone. What Naruto gave Sasuke without ever meaning to was reflection, a mirror, not of skill, but of spirit. Naruto carried a pain no one talked about. And still, he laughed, still reached out, still believed in people. Sasuke didn't understand that, but he felt it. And slowly, something inside him began to shift. Not melt, just loosen. One rainy afternoon, the team took shelter beneath a small overhang after a long mission. Their clothes were soaked, their supplies damp, their moods quiet. Sakura tried to break the silence with small talk. Kakashi read his book as always. Naruto dripping wet, shivering. Muddy sat beside Sasuke and sighed loudly. "Man, we're going to catch a cold." Sasuke didn't respond. Naruto leaned back against the wall, arms behind his head, eyes half closed. "You know," he mumbled, "you act like you're better than everyone." Sasuke finally glanced over. Naruto continued, his voice unusually soft. "But I bet you're just as messed up as me." Silence. Then Naruto added, almost to himself, "Maybe even more." He didn't wait for a reply. Didn't push further. Just closed his eyes and rested his head back. And Sasuke didn't look away. Not for a long time. After that, something invisible began to form between them. A thread. Not friendship. Not yet. But something that felt like understanding. On missions, they moved in rhythm even when they argued. In training, they grew sharper not because they hated each other, but because they needed each other to be better. And on rare nights, when the moon was high and the wind carried memories too heavy to hold alone, Sasuke would sit by his window and remember Naruto's voice. That strange raw honesty. The way he spoke of pain without hiding it. The way he didn't flinch from Sasuke's silence not once. Sasuke didn't say thank you. Didn't open up. Didn't change who he was. But when Naruto spoke now, no matter how loud, how silly, how off-topic, Sasuke listened. Because behind the laughter, he heard something else. Something real. And even though his own eyes still refused to cry, they no longer looked away. As the seasons passed, the rhythm of Team 7 settled deeper, not just as shinobi, but as people. Morning trainings, midday missions, evening walks back through the sun-dappled streets. Some days were ordinary pulling weeds, chasing pets, retrieving scrolls. Others were harder protecting merchants, scouting unknown paths, facing danger. But no matter the task, they were together. And over time, that togetherness began to matter, even to Sasuke. One evening, after a long day in the forest, they rested on a hill just outside the village. The sun was setting slowly, painting the sky in sleepy tones of peach and lavender. Naruto was sprawled on the grass, arms folded behind his head. Sakura sat nearby, humming softly, as she cleaned her kunai. Sasuke sat a little apart, as he always did, knees drawn up, arms wrapped loosely around them. No one spoke for a while. Then Naruto said, "It's weird." Sakura looked over. "What is?" "This," he said, staring at the sky. "Us. Sitting here like this. It's kind of nice." Sasuke didn't reply. But he didn't get up and walk away either. He just stayed. Let the silence hold. Let the breeze pass through. Let the moment live. In the days that followed, laughter started to visit more often. Naruto tripping over a root during a stealth mission. Sakura scolding him with mock fury. Kakashi giving homework that made no sense just to see their confused faces. Even Sasuke, once in a while, allowed himself a soft breath of amusement. Not quite laughter, but close. Just enough to let the others know he was there, not just in body, but in something deeper. Kakashi, always observant, never said much. But he saw the way Sasuke watched his teammates now. The way his eyes lingered on Naruto's grin. The way his shoulder sometimes brushed Sakura's without him moving away. The way he stood quietly at Naruto's side when the boy was too tired to keep yelling. It was subtle, but it was real. A shift, slow and steady, like frost melting from stone. During one mission, they got separated in the woods. Naruto went missing for a while. Not long, just enough to stir anxiety. When they finally found him, scratched and panting but grinning like nothing happened, Sakura scolded him fiercely. Kakashi only sighed. But Sasuke walked up without a word, and for the first time reached out a hand. Naruto blinked, then grinned wider and grabbed it. Sasuke didn't say anything. But later, when they made camp, he stayed closer to the group than usual. That night, he fell asleep listening to Naruto's breath rise and fall. And for once, his own dreams didn't return him to the Uchiha compound. They stayed in the now, with soft voices, flickering firelight, and a warmth that didn't need to be explained. He was still the same boy, eyes guarded, heart heavy, purpose sharp. But now, in quiet moments, he felt something new flicker beside the old pain. Belonging. Not fully. Not loudly. But softly. Like a name spoken gently in a crowded room. Like laughter heard from the next hill over. Like being missed, even if no one says it aloud. Naruto would never understand the full depth of Sasuke's silence. Sakura would never grasp the weight he carried. Even Kakashi, who had known the loss himself, couldn't reach that deepest part. But they stayed. They stood beside him. And that mattered. More than he ever expected. More than he ever let on. There were days now when Sasuke forgot. Forgot to carry the weight. Forgot to calculate every breath. Forgot to remind himself he was alone. Because Naruto didn't let him. He argued over ramen flavors. He dragged him into races they didn't need to run. He pestered him with questions, challenges, dares. And somehow, in that noise, Sasuke felt less hollow. Naruto never asked him to laugh. But somehow, Sasuke's silence became softer, less sharp, less defensive. He started showing up to meetups a little earlier. Started replying with short words instead of nods. Started standing beside Naruto instead of just near him. It wasn't friendship in the usual sense. It was something messier, truer. A strange mix of irritation, recognition, and quiet trust. But even in these warm afternoons and shared dinners, the shadow never left. It waited, patiently behind every calm evening, every mission, every conversation. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't hate. It was a reminder that no matter how much he smiled, there was something Sasuke still needed to do, someone he still needed to face. And the more Naruto reached toward him with careless kindness and endless light, the more that shadow whispered, "You don't belong here." One night, after a particularly difficult mission, they sat under a pale sky. No stars, just a slow moon, floating behind mist. Naruto was uncharacteristically quiet. Sakura leaned her head on her knees, dozing. And Sasuke was watching the horizon. Naruto finally broke the silence. "You ever wonder," he asked softly, "why we ended up like this?" Sasuke turned to look at him. Naruto shrugged, his eyes on the dark line of trees in the distance. "You and me. Sakura, all of it. Feels like we were put together for a reason." Sasuke didn't reply. But something about the way Naruto spoke like he meant it stayed with him. That night, Sasuke didn't sleep much. He sat by the fire long after the others drifted off. And quietly, he let the warmth reach his hands. There were moments when he wanted to tell Naruto about Itachi, about the compound, about the dreams that never ended. But every time the words rose, they caught in his throat. Because once he said them, he would no longer be just the quiet boy in black. He would be something seen. And that still scared him more than anything. Because being seen meant being touched. And being touched meant breaking. And breaking meant losing control. So he stayed silent. And Naruto, maybe sensing that truth, never forced it. He just kept being there, kept laughing, kept challenging, kept shining. One morning, after a long sparring session, Naruto stood beside Sasuke, panting and smiling. "You're strong," he said, catching his breath, "but I'm going to beat you one day." Sasuke smirked faintly. "You can try?" Naruto grinned wider. "I will. Believe it." Sasuke turned away. But the corner of his mouth tugged upward. Because somewhere deep down, he wanted Naruto to keep trying, to keep reaching, to keep believing, even if Sasuke himself couldn't. Team 7 was still learning, still falling and rising together. But now when Sasuke walked through the village, he heard laughter behind him. When he looked at the sky, he remembered voices that stayed. And when he stared into the mirror at night, he saw more than just a boy with a scarred heart. He saw someone slowly, painfully, being pulled back toward the light. By a boy called Naruto. The eyes still refused to cry, but they no longer refused to feel. And in that quiet shift, something beautiful began. A bond, not built with words, not sealed with smiles, but formed in shadow and light, exactly where Sasuke had always lived. There was a time when they laughed together, when missions ended with quiet dinners, when bruises were counted like medals, when Naruto's voice was loud enough to shake the silence from Sasuke's bones. But slowly, something shifted. Not in a sudden crash, but like leaves drying on a tree, color fading, warmth leaving, and Sasuke began to walk a little further from the group, to linger longer in shadows, to watch the horizon with something colder in his eyes. It started with a feeling, a weight returning to his chest, a name echoing louder in his dreams. Itachi. The face he could not escape, the silence he could not outrun. He still heard his words at night, soft, sharp, and final. "Foolish little brother, you are still too weak." The words used to sting. Now they burned. because Sasuke wasn't that little boy anymore. He had grown stronger, faster, sharper. But even now, it wasn't enough. And as Naruto smiled beside him, chasing small victories, Sasuke's heart turned toward something far beyond the village walls, beyond friendship, beyond peace, toward vengeance. During training, he began holding back less. His strikes grew heavier, his eyes colder, his silence more complete. Naruto noticed first. He began asking questions. "You okay? You're acting weird. You trying to show off or something?" Sasuke never answered, because it wasn't about pride. It was about purpose. Something Naruto would never understand, because Naruto still believed in tomorrow. But Sasuke was trapped in yesterday. One afternoon, they sparred beneath the fading sun. What started as practice turned into a fight, not angry, not loud, just real, raw. Naruto shouted, confused. Sakura screamed for them to stop. Kakashi stood still, watching carefully, saying nothing. Sasuke didn't hear any of them. His fists moved faster. His chakra surged deeper. For a moment, Naruto stumbled, and Sasuke didn't stop. He stepped forward, fist raised, eyes flashing. But something inside him froze, just for a second. And that second was enough. He lowered his hand, turned away, and walked off without a word. That night, the wind was colder than usual. Sasuke sat on the edge of a rooftop, looking out over the village. The lights below flickered softly, peaceful, warm. He didn't belong here. Not really. Not anymore. He was chasing a ghost, carrying a fire that no one else could hold. And though Naruto had tried to reach him, tried again and again, Sasuke had begun to realize something. He couldn't stay. Not if he wanted to become strong enough. Not if he wanted to face him. Not if he wanted to end the nightmare. And so silently, without goodbye, he made his decision. The night was still. Too still. Even the wind, usually whispering through the village leaves, seemed to hold its breath. Sasuke stood in the middle of his room. His bag lay open, half filled. He didn't pack much, only what he needed. Only what would not weigh him down. Clothes, kunai, and one old photo creased at the corner. Team 7. Naruto grinning like an idiot. Sakura looking shy. Kakashi with his one eye closed in amusement. And Sasuke, not smiling, but present. A ghost of warmth at the edge of his mouth, so faint that even he hadn't noticed when it was taken. He stared at the photo for a long time. Then slowly, without looking away, he folded it and slid it into his pouch. Not to keep it close, but to bury it. Outside, the streets were dim. Lanterns flickered in doorways. Shadows stretched across the stone paths. The village slept. But Sasuke didn't. He walked past old houses, past ramen stalls now empty, past the training field where Naruto once tripped over a tree root and blamed the tree. Every step felt heavier than the last. But he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant remembering. And remembering hurt. As he neared the village gate, he paused. The silence around him deepened. A part of him, soft, almost childlike, wanted someone to stop him. To ask where he was going. To call out his name. To tell him to stay. But no one came. And maybe, deep down, he had chosen this hour for that very reason. Because leaving in the daylight meant facing eyes. And he wasn't ready for that. Not even Naruto's. especially not Naruto's. The gate was just ahead now. Beyond it, the world, the unknown, the path of power, the trail of the snake, and waiting at the edge of it all, Orochimaru, a name whispered in fear, a face cloaked in poison. But Sasuke didn't fear him. He feared the man in his dreams, the one who had smiled through blood, who had left him alone in a house filled with silence, who had said, "You lack hatred." So Sasuke would walk into that darkness. If hatred was the key, he would carry it like a torch, even if it burned him. Behind him, a soft footstep broke the quiet. He turned, startled, and there stood Naruto, breathing hard, eyes wide, hair a mess from running. "Sasuke," he whispered. Sasuke said nothing. Naruto stepped closer, chest rising and falling. "You're leaving," he said, though it wasn't a question. Sasuke looked away. "I have to." Naruto shook his head. "You don't?" "I do." The words were firm. Not angry, not cold, just final. Naruto's voice trembled. "You're not like him." Sasuke turned sharply. "Don't talk about him." "You're not," Naruto pressed, stepping closer. "You're my friend." That word, friend. It struck deeper than any blade. But Sasuke didn't flinch. He just looked down, eyes shaded. "You don't know what I am." "I know what you're not," Naruto said, softer now. "You're not alone anymore." Sasuke hesitated, just for a heartbeat. Then he whispered, "That's the problem." And with that, he turned and walked into the darkness beyond the gate. The moon watched silently. Naruto stood frozen, fists clenched at his sides, eyes wet with a storm he didn't yet understand. And somewhere down that lonely road, Sasuke's footsteps faded, until only the wind remained. The next morning, the village awoke to light rain. It trickled gently down rooftops, slipped along window panes, pooled in the cracks between stone paths. But for Team 7, the world had stopped turning. Sasuke was gone. Not kidnapped, not taken, not forced. He had chosen it. Walked away from the leaf, from his team, from them. And that knowledge, more than anything, shattered the quiet that Naruto carried inside. Naruto sat on the swing beneath the same old tree, the one he had once swung on as a boy, alone, unnoticed. He hadn't sat there in years. But now the emptiness returned, not because the village ignored him, not because people whispered, but because Sasuke's absence filled the air like a fog, heavy, unshakable, cold. He didn't cry. He just sat, letting the rain fall softly against his forehead, his lashes, his open hands. Sakura didn't speak much either. She stood at the training ground where they had once practiced together. The tree still had kunai marks from Sasuke's strikes. The grass still bent from Naruto's clumsy falls. But it all felt like echoes now. She touched the bark gently, as if trying to trace a memory. And when Kakashi appeared beside her, his eye lowered, she simply whispered, "I couldn't stop him." He didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Back in his apartment, Naruto stared at the ceiling. The shadows crawled slowly across the room as the day passed. He remembered the rooftop, the confrontation, the silence, the words Sasuke had spoken. That's the problem. He didn't understand it then, not fully. But now, as the hours stretched and the light faded, he began to feel the truth behind those words. Sasuke hadn't wanted rescue. He hadn't wanted light. He wanted to burn, to vanish. to become something cold and sharp, like the hatred that made his hands tremble. And Naruto had been too late. He clutched the bedsheet in his fists. "I'll bring you back," he whispered. Not with a smile, not with bravado, just a promise. Soft, almost sleepy, but carved in stone. Because even if Sasuke wanted to disappear, Naruto refused to forget him. He refused to let him fall without a fight. The next morning, he stood outside the Hokage's office, soaking wet, still tired, eyes red. "I want a mission." Tsunade looked up slowly. "What kind of mission?" "A retrieval one," Naruto said. "For Sasuke." Silence. Then she closed her eyes and nodded. They gathered a team. Shikamaru, Kiba, Neji, Choji. Each one chosen for their strength, their instinct, their trust in the village. And Naruto, for something else, for his heart, for the way it refused to quit, even when it broke. Before leaving, he stopped at the training field once more. He stood beneath the sky where they had sparred 100 times, and he whispered again, as if Sasuke could still hear him. "You may have left, but you're still my friend." Then, with eyes forward and fists clenched, he stepped into the trees, chasing a boy made of shadows, carrying a promise made in light. Deep in the valley of the end, 2 statues watched in silence. Madara, Hashirama, legends of friendship and war. And now, beneath their shadows, 2 boys stood. 2 suns, burning in different skies. Sasuke, Naruto, both silent, both breathing heavily, both carrying wounds no jutsu could heal. "I came to bring you back," Naruto said softly. His voice didn't shake, but it didn't rise either. It was tired and steady, like the heart of someone who had run too far to turn around. Sasuke looked at him. "You're wasting your time." Naruto took a step forward. "You're my friend." That word again. Friend. A name that used to mean warmth, laughter, ramen and rooftops. But now, it only weighed heavier on Sasuke's shoulders. "I don't need friends," he said coldly. Naruto didn't flinch. He stepped forward again. "Then why didn't you kill me back at the gate?" Sasuke's jaw tightened. The wind passed between them, slow like breath, and still the statues watched. Then Sasuke raised his hand. Chidori sparked a life. Bright, deadly, beautiful. Naruto answered with Rasengan. Steady, familiar, burning with belief. And just like that, they collided. The ground shook. Water burst upward in a silver arc. Lightning and wind tangled like voices shouting across time. But neither fell. Not yet. They fought with everything they had. Not for victory. Not for glory. But for something deeper. Naruto fought to hold on. Sasuke fought to break free. And every strike was a sentence unspoken. A memory relived. A scream buried. "You don't understand," Sasuke shouted. "I don't have to," Naruto answered. "I just won't let you go." Fists, steel, fire. The clash echoed off stone and sky. But still neither surrendered. Finally their chakra began to fade. Their bodies slowed. Their vision blurred. And there they lay side by side, bruised, broken, breathing. Silence settled again. Only the river whispered now. Naruto turned his head slightly. "I meant it, you know," he murmured. Sasuke didn't look at him. "Meant what?" "That you're my friend," Naruto whispered, eyes half closed. "Even if you hate me." A pause. Sasuke stared up at the clouds, thin and drifting like forgotten thoughts. "I don't hate you," he said quietly. "Not really." Then, after a long breath, "I just can't stay." Naruto didn't respond. He didn't argue, didn't plead. He just lay there, eyes on the sky, chest rising slowly. "I'll still come after you," he said at last. A soft smile, barely there. "Again and again, until you're home." Later, as dawn broke through the valley, Sasuke stood once more. The light touched his face, but it didn't warm him. He looked down at Naruto, unconscious now, and for a moment, he hesitated. But only for a moment. Then he turned and walked away. The statues watched still, silent, witnesses to another beginning, or maybe another ending. Back in the village, there would be questions, tears, quiet nights filled with the sound of what wasn't said. But for now, the path of two suns split. And somewhere beyond the horizon, Sasuke walked alone, chasing the shadow, chased by the light. The rain had stopped. But the silence it left behind was louder than thunder. Sasuke stood at the edge of the ruins, hands slack at his sides, breath barely moving. Itachi was gone. And for the first time in his life, Sasuke felt no victory in his veins, only weight. Only questions. Only the sound of his heartbeat, too quiet, too slow. He had done it. He had finally done it. But why, then? Did it feel like nothing? The sky above was gray, a dull canvas, blank, like his mind. For years he had carried hatred like a weapon, sharpened it, fed it, let it guide every step. He had built himself around that fire. And now, there was nothing left to burn. Later, in the dim light of the hideout, Madara spoke, not with cruelty, not with malice, just a story. A story Sasuke wasn't ready to hear. Words fell like soft knives. "Itachi killed your clan to save your village." Silence. He begged for your life. Breath caught. He lived every day knowing you'd grow to hate him. The world shifted. Everything tilted. Itachi, the monster, the traitor, the ghost of his nightmares, had been protecting him, fighting for him, dying with his name on his lips. Sasuke's fingers curled slowly. His nails dug into his palms. But no tears came. Just the sound of his own voice echoing inside his skull. Why? He wandered alone into the woods. Branches brushed his arms. Leaves whispered, but offered no comfort. And all around him, memories came like fog. Itachi, silent beneath street lamps. Itachi turning away without goodbye. Itachi smiling as blood ran from his lips. He remembered the last look in his brother's eyes. Not hate, not anger, but peace, relief, and perhaps love. Sasuke sat beneath an old tree. He had once dreamed of killing Itachi under a red sky. Now he sat in the gray of dawn, empty, fractured. He closed his eyes and saw his reflection in the river nearby, blurred by ripples, broken, a ghost in the mirror. Who was he now? Not a brother, not an avenger, not even a shinobi, just a boy. A boy who had lost everything, even the reason he had lived. He didn't speak for days, didn't move far, didn't respond when his name was called. And when he finally rose, he wasn't the same. His eyes were quiet, not cold, not angry, just still, like a storm had passed, but left the ground too soaked to walk on. He looked up at the sky once more. The clouds drifted slowly. Somewhere above them, the sun still waited. But down here, Only soft thunder echoed in the distance, and Sasuke walked on, carrying a grief that had no tears and a truth that would never leave him. Days blurred into each other. Sasuke stopped counting them. The sun rose and fell, and he walked beneath it like a shadow with no destination. Each village he passed, each river he crossed, he hoped the wind would take the weight from his shoulders. But memory is not that kind. It follows, quiet, unseen, unrelenting. He saw children training in the fields, laughter, mistakes, their sensei clapping gently as they fell and rose again. And in a flash, he remembered another field, Sakura laughing, Naruto grinning through bruises, Kakashi's calm voice behind his mask, and Itachi, watching from a distance. In memories too distant to reach, Sasuke turned away. Not because he wanted to forget, but because remembering now hurt more than hate ever had. At night the dreams came, soft, muted, but unkind. Itachi younger, Itachi older, Itachi reaching for him not to harm but to shield. Each time Sasuke woke with a start, breath-catching, eyes dry, chest hollow. And in those lonely hours between sleep and dawn, he often sat near water, watching his reflection blur with the ripples. It no longer looked like him. Not the boy who once clung to revenge. Not the child who followed Itachi through the compound, his steps small but eager. Now, just someone who didn't know which face to wear. He began to wonder, what was truth, really? A mission ordered in secret? A brother's sacrifice? A village's betrayal? Did knowing change anything? He had killed the man who loved him most. Not knowing the truth was tragedy. But knowing it now was torment. Because he couldn't undo it. Couldn't apologize. Couldn't ask him why. Only the silence remained. A silence that stretched between life and death. One evening he came across a small shrine in the forest, unattended, unmarked, forgotten by time. He knelt slowly before it, not as a prayer, not even as regret, just to sit. He took out a stone, placed it gently at the shrine's base. It wasn't much, but it was something. A wordless offering to the memory of a brother who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. The wind stirred the leaves above him, a low hush like a lullaby from long ago. And in that stillness, Sasuke closed his eyes. For a moment, he let the silence hold him. Not to comfort, not to forgive, just to witness him. A boy made of broken pieces, sitting in the ruins of a truth too late to save. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faint and slow, not violent, not angry, just sad. And Sasuke whispered, to no one but the wind, I was wrong. Not a confession, not a plea, just truth. Simple, soft, and heavy as stone. Then slowly he rose again and walked into the trees. Not toward revenge, not toward redemption, but toward something else. Something he didn't yet understand. Something beyond the mirror. Sasuke began to speak to shadows. Not out loud. Not always. But in the quiet moments, I'm beside campfires and beneath stars, or sitting with his back against trees older than his pain. He spoke to Itachi. Not with anger. Not anymore. Just questions. Simple ones. Did you hate me? Were you afraid I'd find out? Was I worth all of it? The wind never answered. But sometimes the leaves rustled just enough to sound like breath. He didn't ask for forgiveness because forgiveness was too large, too distant. What he wanted was smaller, closer. He wanted to understand, not Itachi's actions, but his own. What kind of person did you become when everything you believed in turned out to be a lie? What remained when the fire of hatred burned down to embers? Who was he, now that the story had ended and the truth had no hero? He wandered to the edge of an old lake. Its surface was glass, clear, still. Reflecting the clouds like forgotten dreams, he stared at his reflection, saw the eyes of someone who had lived too much, too fast, for someone so young. And there, for the first time in a long time, he let the silence answer. He didn't need a reply. Just space, just stillness, just this quiet moment where he didn't have to run, fight, or remember. That night he dreamed again. But this time, Itachi wasn't bleeding. He wasn't walking away. He was simply sitting beneath a tree, watching the sky, his cloak fluttering in a breeze too soft to hear. Sasuke stood nearby, unsure. Then in the dream, he sat beside him. Neither spoke. But in the silence, something passed between them, not words, but weight. The kind that brothers carry, even when they don't understand each other, even when it hurts. He woke with a strange calm in his chest. Not peace, not yet, but something like it, like standing in the dark, knowing morning will come. He didn't smile, didn't cry, just rose quietly, packed his things, and stepped into the dawn. Everywhere he went, he carried the silence, not like a burden, but like a companion. And sometimes he imagined Itachi walking a step behind him, not haunting, just watching, maybe even proud. And Sasuke would whisper under his breath, "I'm still here." A soft promise, a quiet echo, in the ghost of a life he was only just beginning to live. There came a day when Sasuke stopped walking. He stood at a cliffside, the valley below glowing in morning light. Mist floated like breath. The world looked clean. And in that stillness, something inside him finally quieted. Not because he found answers, but because he stopped needing them. Some things he realized were meant to hurt, to scar, to stay. But pain didn't have to lead anymore. It could simply walk beside him. He took out the old Uchiha crest, faded, worn, once a symbol of pride, then of vengeance, then of loss. He looked at it gently now, not with rage, not with sorrow, just with memory. "My name is Uchiha," he whispered. "But I get to decide what that means. Not the village, not the elders, not even Itachi, just him." He sat under a crooked tree that leaned toward the sky, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to breathe without armor, no jutsu, no mission, no burden, just breath. And in that breath, he felt the world shift, not around him, but within. He thought of Naruto, of his stubborn light, his refusal to give up, his voice always shouting back when Sasuke tried to disappear. And he realized Naruto had seen something in him even Sasuke hadn't seen. Not weakness, not potential, but choice. The choice to be more than his pain. The choice to begin again. He still didn't know where he belonged. Not exactly. Konoha was home, but also not. He had burned bridges, hurt people, walked away when it mattered most. But maybe redemption wasn't a single act. Maybe it was steps, one after another. Slow, quiet, deliberate. Like laying stones across a river, barefoot, knowing it would take time. That night he lit a small fire. The flame crackled softly, casting shadows on the grass. He didn't speak aloud. But in his heart, he reached across the silence to his brother. I won't let it be for nothing. Not your pain. Not mine. And as he lay back under the stars, the firelight flickering in his eyes, he finally felt sleep begin to come. Not haunted, not broken, just tired and alive. The next morning, he walked in a new direction. Not toward war, not toward power, just forward. The ghosts would still follow, but now he didn't run from them. He let them walk beside him, like old friends, like worn stories, like mirrors that no longer scared him. And in the wind, almost too soft to hear, came a whisper. Thank you, little brother. Sasuke paused, closed his eyes, then opened them, and kept walking. The battlefield stretched wide and endless. Ash floated in the air like snow that had forgotten how to melt. Flames had cooled, but their memory lingered in the cracks of the earth. Sasuke stood still in the smoke. Not just a soldier, not just a survivor. Something in between. Around him, ninjas fought. Alliances forged in urgency. Dreams suspended in chaos. But within him, a different battle raged. Not against Madara, not against Kaguya, not even against Naruto, but against himself. He moved like a shadow, silent and sharp, every jutsu precise, every strike calculated. But there was no rage behind his fist now, only resolve. Only the echo of a promise made long ago beneath a tree, beside a grave only he could see. I won't let it be for nothing. Itachi's eyes, Naruto's voice, Sakura's tears. They moved through him like wind, invisible, but impossible to ignore. When Kaguya fell, and the silence returned, Sasuke's heart didn't calm. Instead he turned, his gaze steady. Naruto stood across from him, dust on his cheeks, breath heavy, but his eyes, they still held that light, unbreakable, unwavering. And Sasuke knew this had to end. Not the war, but everything between them. The rivalry, the pull, the gravity. Two stars locked in orbit. One final collision. I'll kill the Kai, Sasuke said quietly. I'll start over. Naruto's brows furrowed. You know I won't let you. Sasuke's voice stayed calm. You'll have to stop me. And just like that, the final battle began. Their fight wasn't like before. This time, there was no anger, no yelling, no desperation. Just two souls, burnt and bruised, clashing like fire and wind. They fought under the stars. They bled under the dawn. They fell into the water, rose again, and kept going. Because this was never about winning. It was about understanding, about breaking everything down until only truth remained. As the sun rose slowly behind the cliffs, they lay side by side once more. Just like before. Just like always. The river murmured nearby. Birds circled overhead. And in the quiet, Sasuke turned his head. Naruto's eyes met his. No gloating. No triumph. Just warmth. Why do you keep doing this? Sasuke asked softly. Naruto smiled. Because I can't let my friend suffer alone. Sasuke closed his eyes. That word again? Friend? He had tried to bury it, to outrun it, to deny it. But here it was, carved into the morning light. The sky grew lighter. Sasuke felt the blood dry on his skin, felt the stillness settle in his bones. He had lost. But this defeat didn't hurt. It felt quiet, cleansing, like letting go of a weight too old to name. He turned his face toward the sky. For once, no shadows followed him. Only light, soft, unforgiving, honest. And he let it touch him, without guilt, without resistance, just as he was, Sasuke Uchiha. Nothing more, nothing less. When the battle ended, Sasuke did not return to Konoha with a hero's welcome. There were no cheers, no celebration. Only quiet footsteps along a familiar road, where memories clung to the walls like ivy. People looked up as he passed. Some turned away. Some watched with careful eyes. Children peeked from behind their mothers. Old men paused mid-conversation. They remembered the boy who had left in the dead of night, the shinobi who had turned his back, the traitor. But Sasuke walked on, not with pride, not with shame, just presence. For the first time in years, he wasn't running toward revenge or away from regret. He was just there, breathing, walking, changing, one step at a time. Tsuna met him at the gates, her expression unreadable, tired, measured. "Why have you come back?" she asked. Sasuke didn't look down, didn't hesitate. "I came to answer for everything I've done," he said softly. No excuses, no defense, only truth. That was enough. The days that followed were quiet. He didn't go out much, didn't wander the old roads or visit the old training grounds. Instead, he sat in silence, sometimes beneath the trees behind the Uchiha compound, sometimes on rooftops, watching the sky shift from orange to gray. Naruto visited him once, brought 2 bowls of ramen. They didn't speak much, just ate, together, like they used to. And when Naruto left, he simply placed a hand on Sasuke's shoulder. No lecture, no questions, only a touch that said, "You're still here. That's enough." Sakura came too. She didn't cry, didn't scold, just sat beside him on a bench in the hospital garden. Birds chirped in the distance. The wind carried the scent of rain. And she whispered, not to guilt him, but to tell him the truth. "I'm glad you're alive." That's all she said. And somehow, that was more than enough. One night, Sasuke stood alone atop the Hokage monument. He looked out at the village. Its lights flickered softly in the distance, not with grandeur, but with life. He thought of Itachi, of their home, of everything they'd both lost. And he said into the wind, "I don't know if I'll ever be forgiven, but I'll live like I deserve to be." It wasn't a vow, not exactly, just a quiet truth, a promise whispered to the ashes beneath his feet. When morning came, he left the village again, not to escape, but to learn, to see the world beyond revenge, to understand what peace really meant, to grow not as a shinobi, but as Sasuke. No title, no burden. Just a boy who had chosen the harder path, the slower one, the one that led to light, even if it took a lifetime. Behind him the sun rose, soft gold spilling across the horizon. And though he walked alone, he didn't feel lonely. Birdsong echoed gently into the trees. Leaves danced in the breeze. The wind didn't push him away anymore. It carried him forward, one step at a time, with quiet resolve, and a heart no longer burning, but healing. The road was quiet. Birds called from high branches. Leaves fluttered in the wind, greeting him like old friends. Sasuke walked with no destination, and for once, he didn't need one. Every step was enough. Every breath was something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Simple, unburdened, alive. He passed through villages where no one knew his name. A farmer offered him tea. A child smiled at his cloak. A cat brushed against his ankle. Small things, unremarkable to most. But to Sasuke, they felt like grace, not forgiveness, not redemption. Just quiet moments that didn't ask him to be anything but present. Some nights he wrote in a worn notebook. Not letters, not records. Just fragments, thoughts, reflections. Pieces of himself he hadn't looked at in years. The wind is softer when you don't fight it. I still see him in the trees sometimes. Maybe pain doesn't vanish. Maybe it just teaches. The pages didn't judge. And when he closed the book, he always felt a little lighter. In one village, a boy tried to steal his coin pouch. Clumsy, obvious. Sasuke caught his wrist gently. The boy looked up frightened, ready for punishment. But Sasuke just knelt down, offered him an apple. The boy blinked and took it. No words, just understanding. And in the boy's retreating footsteps, Sasuke heard echoes of himself, the child who had lost everything, and built a world of silence around him. He let out a breath, slow, steady. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer chased him. He visited Itachi's grave eventually, far from the villages, half covered in moss. He didn't speak much, just sat beside it as the wind moved through the grass. He placed a single white flower, and after a while, he whispered, "You were right." No explanation. No need. He closed his eyes and let the moment hold him. When he opened them, the sky had shifted. Soft amber light poured through the trees. A breeze brushed his cheek, gentle, like a hand that once held his, and he knew. The flame was still there, deep within, but it no longer burned to destroy. It glowed quietly now, steady, warm, like a lantern in the night, guiding him forward. Years would pass, stories would fade, but somewhere, on a quiet path, a lone traveler would still walk beneath the moon, not searching, not fleeing, just walking. And if you look closely, you might see him pause now and then, a hand resting lightly on the hilt of a blade he no longer needed. You might see him watch the sunrise, eyes calm, breath still, as if finally, after a lifetime of shadow, Sasuke Uchiha had found the light beneath the ashes.
Good night.